So today we're going to be looking at pivot tables, and we want to know how within a pivot table we can use this to make sense of our data really easily and break a lot of the data points down that we want to do. So we can see here that we have quite a lot of data, and within this we're not going to be able to understand it really easily without kind of putting it into a special form or anything like that, because there's just so many numbers and bits of data points and stuff. So we want to be able to understand this really easy, and this is what pivot tables are going to help us do. So to start out then, we can see that we have all this, and what we could do is we could go up here and you have the ability to insert a pivot table from here. So we can see that when we've gone to insert the pivot table up at the top, we can see that it's hard coded in the range here, so we can have A1 to AN 1034. But if we were to do that at this point, then what that's going to do is mean that if we add any data to this, then it's not going to be included within our pivot table, because it'll only work down to row 1034. So anything else that we add would just become irrelevant and get cut out, so that our data would be wrong. So a way around this, what we can do is we can just cancel that out there, and we can turn this into a table. So you can see on the insert tab up here we have the table, or we can just press Ctrl and T. And pressing Ctrl and T, now we're going to get this box here, and we can see that we have the table headers up at the top here. So because we have the table headers up at the top, we can press OK, and now we're going to change that into a table. If you don't want to do, or you don't want to keep this style as well with your table, you just want to have it as normal data, you have the options at the side here, and then you can change it however you want to do. But for me, I don't particularly mind it like this, and especially when we add the data on the bottom, I like that it kind of works and it'll just add on to the bottom there. So if we're in the bottom row here and we would just press tab, then we just keep adding the data. But by doing this, then the beauty of this is that when we get to this point here, we can go up into this table point here, which will occur now because we've turned all our data into a table, and we can rename the table. So if we change this here and we say, and we just put Poke, as this is all the Pokemon data, and I like using this as data points just as examples because you have different types and you've got all this number data here, so it works quite well for just being able to explain things. So we can see now that we've changed the table name there, and now at this point when we go to insert, and we can go down to insert pivot table or recommended pivot tables. And one thing to bear in mind is you might want to just have a look at the recommended pivot tables, because when you click into that, then you can see that sometimes it gives you these options here and it will automatically start to work things out. So it might look a little bit confusing here because it's added it into a new sheet here. But what we can see here is we have the filter bar here. So we haven't got any filters at the minute. We can see within the columns. So the columns work along the top here. So we have the generation. So is it the first or the 8th generation there? We have the type down at the side here, so all the different things that you could possibly get, and the sum there of the Pokédex. With this, you can take out what you want, okay, and we can just drag that down to the bottom there, and that will take that out. So if we just move it over to the side there, we can see that that's taken out, but it still keeps the, the generation, and it'll keep the types down at the side there. But we have up here the field names, so we don't want the Pokédex number within that. But some of the things that we might want to know is the totals, so we can just drag that down into the values part there, and we can have that there. And you can see now that it says sum of base, okay? So that's nice and easy then. So what we can do then is, if we've moved the sum of base in there now, then we can move over into our table, and we can right click within this, and we can see here that we've got quite a few options that we can change within the pivot table, and we might want to go show values as a percentage of the total or percentage of the column total. So we can see there that we can change it of a percentage there. We can change it so that it works in averages and things as well. So it's just one to have a look at. So you can summarize it, you could do it as an average, okay, and then it just makes it kind of however you want to do. And like I say, just have a little play around with your values and stuff, and it's kind of see where you are with that. So we have the sum there, and then say we want to put back to the no calculation, and then we can summarize this by the average, say, and then let's say you have the options that you would normally as well up on the home tab, where we can change the decimal place. So we can just drop this down. There you go. So you can just drop it down and make it easier. But we can see that this table is quite wide as well. So one thing that you can do is you can change this around. So we could look at moving the generation over into the filter part here. And we can see with this generation then we've got all these, and now this has added the filter part up here. If we then go up to the filter here, take out that and say just in generation 1, okay, then we can see that that's just done a sum of all the base values here. So we could potentially say that, well, which is the strongest within this. And you also have the ability to filter here. So we can go to the data and you can do the highest to lowest there. So you can see that within generation 1, that the water type are the strongest with a total of 13,374. What you can do as well, if you don't want to be kind of clicking onto this, you can also add in what they call slicers. So we can go back to the insert part here and we can see that we have a slicer over here. So we can add a slicer, and we want our slicers based on the generation there, because we want that to be really easy to just change generation, and it's give us generation 1 to 8 there. Once you've got the slicer, or selected the slicer, you can see up here that you get the option, and you can change the columns or you can change the width. So if we just bump that up there to say that, and then we can just drag it over, make it a little bit bigger, sir. And now we can just move this up here. And now, rather than clicking into each individual one, we can see that we just nice and easy flick through. So if you want to say, you know, which is the strongest in generation 3, then we could quite easily click into number 3 and that'll work there. And also if you press the control button, you can add 2 generations together, generation 1 and generation 2. And we can still see that water comes out on top there. So just one to bear in mind. And if you just clear all of them, then it'll just select them all again. And we can see that water is still kind of coming out on top there for us. You have the option, as you did before, for the pivot tables as well, just to be able to change the designs of the pivot table. So you can change all the colors here and things. We have that ability to just be adding and changing there. So we can also add in grand totals or take them out, and we can just move them there. So we can see that the grand total there is just adding up at the bottom, and you can say for rows and columns, but because we're already in this here where we're adding it all up for the specific generation, then that's just working it out for us already. But this will work a little bit easier. So if I change this over to the columns here and we just select that, so there we go, clear that because we want it all, and we're going to click in, we want the design, and just to show you quickly here, so for the totals part, if you were to put it on for the rows and stuff, then that adds that section there, but you can take that off as well if you want. So on for columns only, so we can see now that that'll just add it onto the bottom there, and if we were to add it back on for rows and columns, now we can see that there. And let's say we had a look at the compact, we've got different rows, so we can see that that now puts in the kind of grid lines back for us and stuff, so you can have a little look there. If you've got any blank rows, you know, then it'll kind of fill these out for you, and it kind of changes that a little bit for you, so you can easily see them. As well, what we can do now is if we were to change this a little bit, so we could say potentially put in the generation, and you know, we have at this point here, so we've moved over now, so we have the generation as collapsible, so we can collapse generation 2, we can collapse generation 1. So because these are collapsible then, and we can work on them, so we could just really, you know, make it a lot smaller if we wanted to do, so you could just see the one particular one that you're working on. Or what we can do is we can go into the pivot table analysis up here, and then we can just get rid of that up there. And you can see now that it will just get rid of the plus or minus thing, so they'll always stay there and you won't be able to break them down anymore. But we can always just add them on just in case you've got quite a lot of data and you just want to be able to see what you've got really easily. Then at least that makes it a little bit easier for you. When you're looking at your pivot table as well, if you want to turn off this side part here, this is called the field list. So we can click into the field list and just click it back on again. And you've also got the field headers, so we can just kind of add and get rid of them. But I always like to keep them on just because it makes it easier. So say we're going to change this back then, so we can put the generations back into the columns there. And then what we could potentially do is add in the type 2 into the rows as well. So there we go. So type 1 and type 2. So we can see now that, within this here, we've got type 1 water, and then it breaks down all the type 2s there for us. And then we've got the type 1, and then we've got all the type 2s, and then we've got the type 1, and then all the type 2s here. And you can kind of really start to see how you can break it down, and it just makes a lot of different data easier and effective in kind of breaking it down for sales and stuff like that. So again, we don't want to keep type 2, so we'll just get rid of that there. And again, we can change all the values and stuff if we want to do. So we say, all right, we don't want to know the base of it. We just want to know, is something a legendary or anything like that. And you can see now that it's worked it all out. So, you can have a look at this really quickly, and you can say that there's no bug types in, no legendary bug types in the generation 1. Or there isn't even any flying or steel there as a type 1. Okay, but what we do have is we've got an electric one, we've got a fire, we've got an ice, and we have 3 psychic within that. And it's really easy to just have a look at these and just break it all down. And it's just, rather than kind of having to go into this data here and then say, right, I want a type 1, okay, and then you kind of working your way across, and you want to find the different thing here. So then you want to go, right, is legendary, so we know that it's type 1, and then you kind of back across here. So then you want type 1, we've got ice, electric, fire, psychic. It's just a quicker and easier way of having a look at data, and you can just see what you want really easy, breaking it down, putting it into the different columns, and rather than having to change different filters all the time, so you can see it. And especially once you start to work into this, put like the generation into the filter part of it there, it just becomes really easier for me. And this is what I like to work in a lot, because I just find it that it breaks stuff down easy, so you can quickly see all of your data values and you don't have to kind of worry about anything. So we've got the multi-selected, so we can just see, within this, if we select them all, say, then we can see that we have the different values here. And again, we can just click within this, clicking on the data, and just filter it there. So we can see that the majority of these legendaries are psychic, dragon, electric, and working the way down, and overall you don't have any bugs. So there's 84 in total, and that's it. It's just really quick to break the data down. But if you've got any questions about any of these, then don't forget to ask, and we'll see you in the next lesson.